I was looking around online for ideas for my next baseball video when I stumbled across a PBS piece that said new evidence might challenge the long-held story of the Black Sox Scandal. And I ended up going down a pretty deep rabbit hole trying to figure out what really happened in that fateful 1919 World Series. But the more I learned, the less the story seemed to make sense. Players who confessed and then denied it for the rest of their lives, key evidence mysteriously disappearing before the criminal trial, and some players' stats that don't seem to match the accusations. One great resource I found was this paper from the UMKC School of Law's Famous Trials Project, which compiled original testimony and historical accounts of the investigation. I'll put the link in the description below. It's an interesting read. So in this video, I'm going to try to get to the bottom of what actually happened. In 1919, the Chicago White Sox were heavily favored to win the World Series against the Cincinnati Reds. 8 White Sox players allegedly agreed to throw the World Series and worked with gamblers connected to organized crime. In 1963, 8 Men Out is published by sports writer Elliot Asanoff. It's a non-fictional reconstruction of the events surrounding the 1919 World Series. It was later made into a movie in 1988. The book and movie both essentially portrayed White Sox owner Charles Comiskey as cheap and unwilling to pay bonuses. For example, allegedly sitting Eddie Cicotte at 29 wins to avoid paying a bonus for 30 wins. The players then get approached by gamblers connected to organized crime who bribe them to throw the World Series. Shoeless Joe Jackson is portrayed as more sympathetic, and the gamblers are portrayed as more villainous. The players are tried in criminal court and acquitted, and the new commissioner bans them anyway. However, as historians dug deeper, many contradictions stood out. As this article points out, organizational contract cards at the National Baseball Hall of Fame show that the White Sox opening day payroll of $88,461 was more than $11,000 higher than the Reds players, and several White Sox players were among the highest paid at their positions. Regarding Cicotte's being sat to avoid paying a 30-win bonus of $10,000, game logs from that season showed that he won his 29th game on September 19th, had a no decision 5 days later, giving up 5 earned runs in 7 innings, then starting 4 days later on September 28th and coming out after 2 innings. That is an early pull of 1 earned run in 2 innings, but many teams who are already in a playoff spot will use the last game as a tune-up. Regardless, he did not get sat after win 29 and had a full start to win number 30. In September 1920, a Cook County grand jury in Chicago began investigating the 1919 World Series fix. During that investigation, Eddie Cicotte gave sworn testimony admitting he had agreed to throw the series and had accepted money from gamblers. Shoeless Joe Jackson also testified, receiving $5,000. He claimed he was supposed to get $20,000, but only received the $5,000. In 1921, the original confession documents vanish. Additionally weakening the case, the testimony was supposed to have been given by the players voluntarily and without any offer of a reward. However, Cicotte said the former state's attorney had told him he would be taken care of, which Cicotte assumed meant not prosecuted. Joe Jackson told a similar story. Because of this, the case against the players collapsed and they were found not guilty. Years later, copies of the confessions were discovered in the files of Charles Comiskey's lawyer. One of them was this file of Shoeless Joe's confession that he received $5,000 from teammate Lefty Williams. He even said he told his wife, and she said it was an awful thing to do. For the rest of his life, Shoeless Joe denied being involved. But if that's true, why confess in such detail in the first place? Of the 8 White Sox players banned for life, most played noticeably worse than their regular season results, and 1 or 2 seemed to outperform their numbers. Let's take a look in more detail. For pitcher Eddie Cicotte, Game 1 was clearly his worst, 6 earned runs in 3 2/3 innings. His ERA in the regular season was 1.82. In Game 4, Cicotte gave up only 2 runs in a complete game, but they lost 2-0. In that game, Cicotte made 2 errors in the 5th inning that helped give the game to Cincinnati. Lefty Williams went 0-3, a major league record, giving up 4 earned runs in Game 2 in 8 innings, 4 more in Game 5 in 8 innings, and 4 in 0.1 innings in the 8th game. Chick Gandil hit .233 in the series after hitting .290 in the regular season. Happy Felsch hit .192 after hitting .275 in the regular season. Fred McMullen only went 0 for 2 in the series, but was present when the talk of throwing the series was discussed and said, "Include me or I'll expose it." Weed Risberg hit .080 after a .256 season and made 4 errors, the most in the series. He had made 32 errors that season, but 4 in 8 games is still a lot. Buck Weaver is perhaps the strangest in the scandal. He hit .324 in the series after a .296 season. He had 4 doubles and a triple, the most extra base hits on the team. He made 0 errors, despite making 20 in the regular season. By all accounts, he looked like he played his best. However, he admitted he had attended at least one meeting where the series fixing was discussed, and he did not report it. He insisted that he refused to participate and never accepted any money. Under the new commissioner's ruling, simply knowing about the fix and failing to report it was enough for a lifetime ban. Now the most talked about player, Shoeless Joe. For years I've heard the .375 batting average given as evidence that he didn't cheat. But when I looked at the game logs and the play-by-plays, I noticed something. In games where the Chicago White Sox won, Joe was 6 for 11 for a .545 batting average. In the games the White Sox lost, Joe only hit 6 for 21, a .285 average. But here's where it gets interesting. 3 of those hits from the losses came when the White Sox were clearly losing. A 2-out single in the 8th inning of Game 2, down 4-2, where fellow conspirator Happy Felsch grounds out on one pitch to end the inning. A solo home run in the 3rd inning of Game 8, down 5-0, and a double in the bottom of the 8th in Game 8, down 10-1. Did Shoeless Joe really try to win? That's for you to decide. The popular story is fairly simple. White Sox first baseman Chick Gandil approached a Boston gambler named Sport Sullivan with the idea of fixing the World Series. Sullivan then brought the opportunity to powerful gambling financiers who could bankroll the scheme. But decades later, Gandil told Sports Illustrated Sullivan was the one who proposed the idea. According to Gandil, he told Sullivan fixing a World Series with 7 or 8 players would be impossible. Sullivan allegedly replied, "It's been done before, it can be done again." And that's where the story starts to break down. Some researchers believe many gambling syndicates in cities like Chicago, Boston, Detroit, St. Louis, and Kansas City may have been trying to profit from the fix at the same time. If that's true, the players may have been dealing with several different organizers who all believed that they were financing the fix. The most famous name linked to the scandal is New York gambling financier Arnold Rothstein. He's often portrayed as the man who financed the entire operation, but historians still debate how involved he actually was. Rothstein even testified before the grand jury in Chicago that he was asked to fund it and turned it down. More than a century later, historians still can't fully reconstruct the gambling side of the fix. It's unclear who first proposed the fix, how many gambling syndicates were involved, or who ultimately financed it. Even before the 1919 series began, there were some hints of corruption. Chicago Herald sports writer Harold Fullerton had a conversation with a former American League pitcher turned gambler named Bill Burns, who spoke about the Reds winning the series as a sure thing. Fullerton was unsettled by that. Around the same time, an influx of money is bet on Cincinnati, which caused the odds against them to fall rapidly. They went from betting underdogs to small favorites. Several correspondents, including ex-pitcher Christy Mathewson, joined Fullerton to compare notes on any plays they felt were questionable. Mathewson reportedly marked several plays in his scorecard he thought were unusual. Fullerton also noted several plays he believed were suspicious, including defensive mistakes and weak contact at key moments. After the series, Fullerton went even further, publicly suggesting that several White Sox players might not return to the team the following season. However, Mathewson wrote his own article dismissing Fullerton and saying a fix was virtually impossible. Years later, there are a ton more unanswered questions surrounding the scandal. Did White Sox owner Charles Comiskey know about the fixing before the World Series? During the trial, the White Sox mostly unwealthy players somehow had the best lawyers in Chicago. Who paid them? Maybe Comiskey or Rothstein? Was the fix on throughout the whole series? After being down 4-1, the White Sox won games 6 and 7. Who financed the fix? The famous story says Rothstein, but the historical record is murky. How many players were truly involved? 8 players were banned for life, but historians still debate the roles some of them played. In 1921, the 8 players accused in the Black Sox Scandal were tried in criminal court and acquitted after the key confessions mysteriously disappeared from the case. But baseball's new commissioner, Kennesaw Mountain Landis, had no intention of letting the courts decide the fate of the sport. The day after the court's verdict, Landis announced that regardless of the jury's decision, any player who had taken part in fixing a game or even knew about it and failed to report it would be banned from baseball for life. Landis went even further. When several of the banned players tried to organize barnstorming exhibition games, he warned that any player who participated with them would also be banned from organized baseball. This basically ended any real opportunity for the banned players to earn a living playing baseball again. With so many different versions of events, the only thing that's clear is we may never know for sure exactly what happened in the 1919 World Series. What do you think? Did Shoeless Joe try to win or lose the series? Should Buck Weaver have been banned for life just for knowing about it and not telling? Let me know in the comments.